The room is quiet. Not because nothing is happening, but because the loudest battle in your life has never made a sound. At this very moment, someone is waking up before sunrise to build a future nobody else can see. Somewhere else, another person is giving up on a dream they've carried for years, not because they lack talent, intelligence, or opportunity, but because of a single invisible force they never learned to recognize. It isn't fear. It isn't laziness. It isn't bad luck. It's the story they keep telling themselves. Here's the unsettling truth. Most people will never discover the real reason they stay stuck. They'll blame their circumstances, their childhood, the economy, their age, their education, or the people around them. They'll spend decades trying to change their lives while unknowingly protecting the very identity that's keeping them trapped. And if that sounds impossible, ask yourself one question. Have you ever promised yourself that tomorrow would be different? Have you ever sworn this was the last time you would procrastinate, the last time you would quit, the last time you would settle for less? If you have, then you've already experienced one of psychology's greatest paradoxes. You can genuinely want to change and still unconsciously fight against every step that would make change possible. The strange part is that your brain isn't trying to ruin your life. It's trying to protect it. Not the life you dream about. The life you've become familiar with. Human beings are wired to seek certainty before success. To your brain, the known is often safer than the unknown. Even when the known is painful. That's why people remain in jobs they hate. Relationships that drain them. Routines that slowly steal their ambition. Familiar suffering feels less dangerous than unfamiliar possibility. Imagine standing at the edge of a cliff. Your body tells you to step back. That's survival. Now imagine standing at the edge of becoming the person you've always wanted to be. Your mind often reacts in exactly the same way. It interprets uncertainty as danger. The frightening reality is that many people mistake this resistance for evidence that they aren't capable. In truth, resistance often appears precisely because you're approaching something meaningful. History is filled with moments that seemed impossible until someone refused to accept the story everyone else believed. For thousands of years, athletes believed running a mile in under 4 minutes was beyond human capability. Doctors warned it could damage the body beyond repair. Experts insisted the limit was biological. Then, in 1954, Roger Bannister crossed the finish line in 3 minutes and 59.4 seconds. The remarkable part wasn't only that he broke the record. Within months, others began doing the same. The human body hadn't suddenly evolved. The barrier had never been purely physical. It was psychological. What invisible 4-minute mile exists in your own life? What have you accepted as impossible simply because you've repeated it long enough to mistake it for truth? The philosopher Epictetus once observed that people are disturbed not by things themselves, but by the views they take of them. More than 2,000 years later, neuroscience is quietly confirming what ancient philosophy suspected. The brain constantly rewrites itself according to repeated thoughts and repeated actions. Every belief rehearsed often enough becomes easier to believe tomorrow. That process has a name: neuroplasticity. Your brain isn't a finished sculpture. It's sweat clay. Every habit presses another fingerprint into its surface. Every excuse strengthens a pathway. Every courageous decision builds another. The terrifying implication is that you are always becoming someone, whether you intend to or not. The question isn't whether your identity is changing. The question is who it's changing into. Think about the words people casually attach to themselves. I'm terrible with money. I'm just not disciplined. I've never been confident. I'm always late. I can never stay consistent. Each sentence sounds harmless. Yet every time it's spoken, the brain hears it as an instruction rather than an observation. Eventually, behavior begins defending the identity those words created. Psychologists have repeatedly found that humans naturally seek consistency between who they believe they are and how they behave. It's why lasting transformation rarely begins with changing actions alone. Actions fade when identity stays the same. Imagine planting seeds in poisoned soil. It doesn't matter how healthy the seeds are. The environment wins. Identity is the soil. Habits are the seeds. Most people spend years replacing seeds while ignoring the ground beneath them. David Goggins often speaks about confronting the voice that begs for comfort. That voice isn't evil. It's ancient. Millions of years of evolution designed it to conserve energy, avoid risk and seek immediate relief. In prehistoric times, those instincts increased survival. Today, they often sabotage potential. The modern world has become a paradise for ancient instincts. Food requires almost no effort. Entertainment never ends. Distraction fits inside your pocket. Approval arrives in notifications. Your biology evolved for scarcity. Your environment delivers abundance. The conflict between the two has quietly become one of the defining struggles of modern life. Every swipe, every endless scroll, every unnecessary delay feels insignificant. Until you realize identity is built one decision at a time. Nobody wakes up one morning and becomes undisciplined. Nobody accidentally becomes extraordinary either. Tiny actions, repeated long enough, become invisible architects of destiny. Consider the Japanese concept of Kaizen. The philosophy of continuous improvement through small, consistent progress. It rejects the fantasy that transformation arrives through dramatic moments. Instead, it suggests something almost disappointing. Greatness is usually boring. It looks like reading 10 pages when nobody is watching. Taking the walk you promised yourself. Writing one paragraph. Saving a small amount. Choosing sleep over another hour of meaningless distraction. None of these actions feel life-changing. Until years pass. Then people call the results talent. Michael Jordan wasn't remembered because he enjoyed winning. He was remembered because he became obsessed with preparation long before anyone applauded the outcome. The shots the world celebrated were built on thousands nobody witnessed. People admire confidence without seeing repetition. They admire mastery without seeing monotony. They admire resilience without seeing loneliness. Behind almost every extraordinary life hides an ordinary routine performed with extraordinary consistency. But consistency raises an uncomfortable question. Why do intelligent people repeatedly abandon routines they know will improve their lives? The answer lies in something psychologists call immediate reward bias. Your brain naturally values rewards available now over rewards promised later. Exercise offers health months from today. Scrolling offers stimulation now. Saving money offers security years ahead. Impulse buying offers pleasure immediately. Writing a book offers fulfillment someday. Watching another video offers comfort this second. Your future constantly negotiates with your present. Most people let the present win. Not because they're weak. Because their brains were designed that way. Fortunately, what evolution built, awareness can interrupt. One of the simplest ways to reclaim control begins with reducing the distance between intention and action. Instead of asking yourself to complete an hour-long workout, tell yourself you'll put on your trainers. Instead of demanding that you write for 3 hours, promise yourself one sentence. This seems almost too small to matter. That's precisely why it works. The hardest part of almost every meaningful task isn't doing it. It's beginning. Once momentum exists, motivation often follows. Waiting for motivation before action is like waiting for warmth before lighting a fire. The fire comes first. Then the heat. Viktor Frankl survived circumstances designed to erase hope itself. Amid unimaginable suffering, he reached a conclusion that still echoes through psychology today. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our freedom to choose. That space is smaller than most people realize. Sometimes it's only a few seconds. The urge to quit appears. You pause. You choose differently. The temptation arrives. You breathe. You choose differently. Someone insults you. You resist reacting. You choose differently. Identity changes inside those invisible moments. Not during speeches. Not during New Year's resolutions. Inside decisions so small that almost nobody notices them except your brain. Every choice becomes evidence. Evidence becomes belief. Belief becomes identity. And identity quietly becomes destiny. The greatest prison is rarely built with walls. It's built with conclusions. I'm too old. I'm too young. I'm too late. I'm not enough. Every one of those sentences feels personal. None of them are permanent. The question is whether you're willing to stop defending them. Because the moment you stop arguing for your limitations, something remarkable begins to happen. For the first time in a long time, your future becomes larger than your past. You begin to notice something strange once you start paying attention to the lives of remarkable people. Their defining moments almost never looked remarkable while they were living them. History remembers the breakthrough. But it rarely lingers on the thousands of ordinary days that made the breakthrough inevitable. Thomas Edison is often remembered for the light bulb. But that memory hides a deeper truth. Before success became history, failure was simply another Tuesday. Experiment after experiment collapsed into disappointment. Journalists asked how it felt to fail so many times. His response has been repeated for generations because it revealed a mindset that separates persistence from stubbornness. He hadn't failed thousands of times. He had discovered thousands of ways that didn't work. Most people hear that story and think it celebrates optimism. It doesn't. It celebrates identity. Someone who believes they are a person who learns interprets failure differently from someone who believes they are a person who must always succeed. The event may be identical. The meaning is completely different. Meaning is one of the most powerful forces in human psychology. Two people can endure the same hardship. One emerges stronger. The other gives up. Often, the difference isn't the hardship itself. It's the story attached to it. Imagine carrying two identical backpacks. One is filled with supplies for a journey you chose. The other is filled with bricks someone forced upon you. They weigh the same. Yet one feels purposeful while the other feels unbearable. Purpose changes the weight of pain. That helps explain why athletes willingly suffer through exhausting training sessions. Entrepreneurs accept years of uncertainty. Artists spend countless lonely nights refining their craft. And explorers risk comfort for discovery. Pain without meaning becomes suffering. Pain with meaning becomes investment. This is where many people unknowingly sabotage themselves. They expect discomfort to disappear before they continue. But what if discomfort isn't the enemy? What if it's evidence that your mind is expanding beyond its previous limits? Think back to the first time you learned to ride a bicycle. At first, every movement demanded conscious effort. Balance felt impossible. Falling seemed inevitable. Eventually, something extraordinary happened. Without realizing it, the task became automatic. Your brain had literally rewired itself. The same process happens with courage. The first difficult conversation feels terrifying. The 10th feels uncomfortable. The 100th feels natural. Confidence isn't usually born before action. It grows because of repeated action. This explains one of the biggest misconceptions surrounding fearless people. They aren't necessarily experiencing less fear. They're simply no longer allowing fear to make the final decision. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years imprisoned. Imagine losing nearly 3 decades of your life behind bars. Many people would expect bitterness to define every remaining year. Instead, Mandela emerged with a vision larger than revenge. That doesn't mean he never felt anger. It means he refused to let anger become his identity. There's an enormous difference. Emotions are visitors. Identity is the house. When people confuse the two, temporary feelings become permanent labels. I feel anxious quietly transforms into I am an anxious person. I made a mistake becomes I am a failure. The brain listens carefully to these small shifts in language. So perhaps one of the most underestimated habits isn't meditation or journaling or productivity systems. It's paying attention to the sentences you repeat when nobody else is listening. Every morning, your inner voice begins narrating your life before you've even left your bed. I'm already behind. This day is going to be stressful. Nothing ever changes. Those thoughts aren't harmless background noise. They're forecasts. And the mind has a remarkable tendency to search for evidence that confirms its own predictions. Psychologists call this confirmation bias. Once your brain expects a certain outcome, it unconsciously notices information that supports that expectation while ignoring evidence that contradicts it. It's as if your mind becomes a film director, deciding which scenes deserve attention. If you believe people dislike you, your brain notices every awkward silence. If you believe opportunities never appear, your attention skips over possibilities standing directly in front of you. Reality hasn't changed. Your filter has. Now consider the opposite. Imagine beginning each day with a different question. Not what will go wrong? But what opportunity might I have overlooked yesterday? Not why am I like this? But who am I becoming through today's decisions? Questions direct attention. Attention shapes perception. Perception influences behavior. Behavior creates results. The first difficult conversation feels terrifying. The 10th feels uncomfortable. The 100th feels natural. Confidence isn't usually born before action. It grows because of repeated action. This explains one of the biggest misconceptions surrounding fearless people. They aren't necessarily experiencing less fear. They're simply no longer allowing fear to make the final decision. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years imprisoned. Imagine losing nearly 3 decades of your life behind bars. Many people would expect bitterness to define every remaining year. Instead, Mandela emerged with a vision larger than revenge. That doesn't mean he never felt anger. It means he refused to let anger become his identity. There's an enormous difference. Emotions are visitors. Identity is the house. When people confuse the two, temporary feelings become permanent labels. I feel anxious quietly transforms into I am an anxious person. I made a mistake becomes I am a failure. The brain listens carefully to these small shifts in language. So perhaps one of the most underestimated habits isn't meditation or journaling or productivity systems. It's paying attention to the sentences you repeat when nobody else is listening. Every morning, your inner voice begins narrating your life before you've even left your bed. I'm already behind. This day is going to be stressful. Nothing ever changes. Those thoughts aren't harmless background noise. They're forecasts. And the mind has a remarkable tendency to search for evidence that confirms its own predictions. Psychologists call this confirmation bias. Once your brain expects a certain outcome, it unconsciously notices information that supports that expectation while ignoring evidence that contradicts it. It's as if your mind becomes a film director, deciding which scenes deserve attention. If you believe people dislike you, your brain notices every awkward silence. If you believe opportunities never appear, your attention skips over possibilities standing directly in front of you. Reality hasn't changed. Your filter has. Now consider the opposite. Imagine beginning each day with a different question. Not what will go wrong? But what opportunity might I have overlooked yesterday? Not why am I like this? But who am I becoming through today's decisions? Questions direct attention. Attention shapes perception. Perception influences behavior. Behavior creates results, and results reinforce identity. It becomes a cycle. The beautiful truth is that destructive cycles and empowering cycles operate according to the same psychological rules. The only difference is where they begin. Abraham Lincoln faced repeated defeats before becoming president. Business failures, election losses, personal tragedy, public criticism. If history had frozen his story at almost any earlier chapter, the verdict would have been devastating. Fortunately, life isn't judged halfway through. Neither is yours. Many people evaluate themselves based on a single season. One difficult year convinces them they're permanently unsuccessful. One rejection convinces them they're unlovable. One failed business convinces them they're not entrepreneurs. But documentaries never end after the conflict begins. Neither do meaningful lives. Every compelling story reaches a point where the main character questions whether continuing is worth the cost. The audience doesn't remember that scene because it contains certainty. They remember it because uncertainty forces transformation. Perhaps you've been waiting for certainty before making your move. Perhaps certainty was never the requirement. Think about the Apollo missions. Before human beings walked on the moon, thousands of calculations still contained uncertainty. Engineers couldn't eliminate every risk. Exploration has always demanded action before complete confidence. The same principle quietly governs ordinary life. You don't become confident before starting. You become confident because you started. Somewhere, right now, another version of you exists only as potential. Not in another universe. Inside today's choices. One version chooses convenience. The other chooses growth. One delays the difficult phone call. The other makes it. One spends another evening wondering why life feels stagnant. The other spends that evening building a future invisible to everyone else. Those versions drift further apart with every repeated decision until, years later, they hardly resemble each other. People often call this fate. In reality, it's accumulation. Success rarely arrives as an explosion. It arrives as compound interest applied to behavior. A single page read each day becomes dozens of books. A modest workout becomes a stronger body. A daily conversation strengthens a relationship. One thoughtful decision with money becomes long-term stability. Tiny actions seem powerless because their rewards are delayed. Yet delayed rewards often become the biggest rewards of all. This creates another fascinating paradox. The habits that change your life usually feel like they're changing nothing at all. Until the day everything is different. Then one morning, almost without warning, people begin asking a question that sounds like a compliment but often hides a misunderstanding. How did you change so much? They weren't there for the mornings when nobody applauded. They didn't see the evenings when quitting felt reasonable. They missed the quiet moments when the most important victories happened entirely inside your mind. Transformation rarely announces itself. It accumulates beneath the surface until one day the visible world finally catches up with the invisible work. Nature has always understood this better than we do. A bamboo seed can spend years appearing to accomplish almost nothing. Day after day, the soil looks empty. An impatient observer might assume nothing is happening. But beneath the ground, an intricate network of roots is expanding, strengthening and preparing for extraordinary growth. Then, in what seems like an impossibly short period, the bamboo shoots skyward. People celebrate the sudden rise. They overlook the invisible of years that made it possible. Your own life follows a similar rhythm. The hours you spend learning, practicing, failing, reflecting and trying again may appear insignificant to everyone around you. Yet every one of those moments is building roots that no one else can see. Invisible progress is still progress. Modern culture rarely rewards patience. Algorithms favor instant reactions. Headlines promise overnight success. Social media compresses years of effort into 30-second highlights. We compare our ordinary Tuesday with someone else's greatest achievement and quietly conclude that we're falling behind. But comparison has a hidden cost. Every minute spent measuring someone else's journey is a minute not invested in your own. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius wrote reminders to himself that still feel startlingly modern. He warned against becoming distracted by the opinions, successes and failures of others because the only life we truly possess is the one unfolding within our own choices. He understood something that neuroscience would later reinforce. Attention is a finite resource. Where you repeatedly place it determines the architecture of your future. If your attention constantly belongs to outrage, your mind becomes skilled at anger. If it belongs to distraction, your mind becomes skilled at avoiding depth. If it belongs to deliberate practice, reflection and meaningful work, your mind gradually becomes capable of achievements that once felt impossible. Attention is not just what you notice. Attention is what you become. That is why one of the most powerful changes you can make doesn't require extraordinary talent or endless motivation. It requires protecting your attention with the same determination that you would protect your health. Before reaching for your phone each morning, spend a few quiet minutes deciding what deserves your focus today. Write down one meaningful objective. Not 10. Just one. Give your brain a destination before the world starts pulling it in every direction. It seems almost too simple. Yet simplicity is often where mastery begins. Elite performers rarely succeed because they know secret techniques. More often, they succeed because they consistently execute fundamentals that everyone else dismisses as boring. Kobe Bryant became legendary not because he searched endlessly for shortcuts but because he embraced repetition that others avoided. Long before arenas echoed with applause, empty gyms witnessed a commitment that few people were willing to match. Excellence was never an event. It was a habit disguised as routine. The same principle appears in every field. Musicians practice scales. Writers rewrite paragraphs. Scientists repeat experiments. Craftsmen refine tiny details invisible to most people. The world celebrates masterpieces while forgetting that masterpieces are usually built from thousands of unremarkable moments performed with extraordinary care. And perhaps that's encouraging. Because if greatness depended on dramatic inspiration, very few people would ever experience it. But if greatness depends largely on returning again and again to meaningful actions regardless of mood, then the path becomes available to anyone willing to walk it. There will still be difficult days. Days when your progress feels invisible. Days when doubt whispers more convincingly than hope. Those days do not invalidate the journey. They are the journey. When a storm passes through a forest, the strongest trees are not always the tallest. They are often the ones whose roots have learned to bend without breaking. Resilience isn't the absence of pressure. It is the ability to remain rooted while pressure reshapes you. That resilience grows through recovery as much as effort. Rest is not surrender. Reflection is not laziness. A mind that never pauses eventually loses the clarity required to move forward. Sleep, exercise, meaningful relationships and moments of stillness are not distractions from success. They are part of the system that makes sustained success possible. Many people burn out because they confuse constant motion with meaningful progress. A compass matters more than speed. Before climbing faster, ask whether your ladder is leaning against the right wall. Success achieved at the cost of your health. Integrity or deepest values often feels strangely empty because the destination was never truly yours. Real fulfillment comes from aligning your daily actions with the person you genuinely want to become, not the person the world expects you to imitate. One day, years from now, your life will become a story someone else could tell. They will remember the visible chapters. The promotion. The business. The book. The medal. The family. The breakthrough. But only you will remember the invisible decisions that made those chapters possible. The mornings when you kept your promise to yourself. The conversations where you chose courage instead of comfort. The habits you protected when nobody was watching. The excuses you refused to believe. The fears you carried anyway because your purpose mattered more. Those moments will never appear on a trophy. They will never trend online. Yet they are the true authors of every meaningful achievement. So if you're waiting for a sign, perhaps this is it. Not because a documentary can transform your life. It can't. Words alone have never changed anyone. People change when they decide that their actions will finally agree with the future they keep imagining. In a few minutes, this narration will end. The screen will fade. Silence will return. And then something extraordinary will happen. You'll face a choice so ordinary that it almost seems unimportant. You'll decide what to do next. You'll either return to the familiar patterns that have quietly shaped your past, or you'll take one small action that your future self will one day look back on with gratitude. Not because it's dramatic. Because it's different. Remember Roger Bannister. The barrier looked absolute until someone proved it wasn't. Remember Viktor Frankl. Freedom began in the smallest space between stimulus and response. Remember Mandela. Identity is stronger than circumstance. Remember Kobe Bryant. Mastery is hidden inside repetition. Remember every anonymous person who changed a life not through one heroic moment, but through thousands of quiet decisions that no one celebrated at the time. Their greatest advantage was never perfection. It was the willingness to begin again. Again after failure. Again after disappointment. Again after fear. Again after success. Again tomorrow morning. The future is not waiting for a different version of you. It is waiting for today's version to make a different decision. Years from now, you'll either remember this as another video you watched, or as the moment you stopped searching for the life you wanted and started building it. Because in the end, destiny is rarely written in giant leaps. It is written in the smallest promises you refuse to break. And the most powerful decision you will ever make is not deciding what you want to become. It is deciding who you'll be today.